Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Today I am joined by my friends and colleagues Dana and Alex to break down your horoscopes for the month of May. We are going to be focusing on everything happening in the sign of Aries, especially the upcoming ingress of Saturn into Aries. So you have that to look forward to today. A few quick promos before we get into it. As always, remember to like and subscribe. If astrology is a part of your spiritual life, then consider this channel a part of your daily spiritual practice. It really helps our channel to grow when people subscribe and like. You can find transcripts of any of these daily talks on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. I'm going to take you over there because we are in the midst of our enrollment season. So you click on the first year course here, and you're going under courses page, and you're going to go to the first year course page where you can learn more about our upcoming program, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. This is a class in ancient Hellenistic astrology. Everything at Nightlight includes a fusion of modern archetypal astrology and psychological astrology. But alongside that, you're going to learn this ancient approach to astrology that is really, really fantastic to learn about. It deepens your ability to be accurate, specific, predictive, learn the structure and craft language of astrology, the history and philosophy of astrology. There are 30 online webinars on the year. I lead all of them live, but if you can't attend the live webinars, then you will get the recordings to watch on your own time. Every class is about 2 to 3 hours in length. We have breakout study sessions led by tutors, a staff that handles a forum discussion, so you can ask questions year round and get replies from our staff in the tutoring forum. So lots of practical material there to help you take your astrology to the next level. At the bottom, you're going to find the enrollment options. Early bird payment and the early bird installment plan are available until May 15th. Take advantage of those to save on the cost of the course. And as always, we have need-based tuition. So if you're someone who wants to take the program, but you find our price point inaccessible for your budget, you live with some restraints, or you are on a fixed or limited income, we understand. We want to make sure that people have a flexible pricing option who need help. So if that's you, just use the tuition assistance. No shame. Please take advantage of that. We like to make sure that people of all backgrounds are welcome to study a spiritual topic. The other thing that I am promoting this week, just as a favor to a colleague, there is a book out that just came out called Divination, Oracles, and Omens, and it is edited by Michelle Aroney and David Zeitlyn. This is a great book. It's just got a total collection and really nicely illustrated of different divinatory oracular traditions from all over the planet. And it's just it's really cool to see all of the world's great divinatory traditions kind of collected and celebrated in one place. It's a neat little reference tool. They asked me to take a look at it. They sent me a copy. I get no kickbacks or anything for promoting this. I just wanted people who like divination, who like my channel, to know that I think this is a cool book that you could add to your collection. You'll find in the description of today's video, in the link there, you'll find the links to go and order a copy if you want to support them. And I think anytime academics are doing this kind of work to celebrate something spiritual, to celebrate and recognize and honor divination, that it's important to support. And that's why I'm doing this, purely for the love of what they're doing. So great little resource. Glad I have it. Hope you'll check it out. Okay, on that note, let us bring Dana and Alex onto the program to talk about your horoscopes. Hey, guys.
Hey.
Well, hello.
Adam's
We're back.
Yeah.
You're back.
Thank you guys for covering for me while we were on our spring break family vacation. It was so nice to be able to take a little time off, and you guys stepped in and did such a nice job. The feedback was so wonderful. So yeah, I love you guys.
Well, we had a
love
blast.
you too.
But we're back. We're glad you're back, but it was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Well, we have a big month ahead of us. Let's go ahead and get into it. I'm going to bring the real-time clock up, and we're just going to point out what our focus for the month will be. Of course, Neptune has recently entered Aries. We had a solar eclipse in Aries. We had Venus and Mercury retrograde start off in Aries. Now Saturn is joining the party this month, toward the very end of the month, right? So we decided that it would be good to prep people for the ingress of Saturn into Aries with our horoscopes this month. Even though it's coming at the end, we also have Venus traveling back through the degrees covered in her retrograde in Aries. Neptune still just entered the sign of Aries. Now Saturn, by the end of the month, joins Aries. So we're going to focus again on the whole sign house of Aries in your horoscopes. with a special emphasis on what Saturn is likely to start adding into the mix. So we're going to go through that. Alex is going to cover our cardinal signs for the day, and we'll each add a little reflection as we go. I'm going to take fixed, and Dana's going to take mutable. Given that this is emphasis on Aries, we are going to start with Aries. Sometimes we start with Pisces just to make sure that you get the love. But we will start with Aries today. We'll work our way around, and we'll each add a little something as we go. So you guys are new to the channel and haven't seen this. There's a lot of new people to the channel. Dana and Alex and I always kind of rotate who takes what sign, and then we each add a little something as we go. So on that note, you guys ready?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
All right. We got this.
Yes.
I've queued up the real-time clock so that you can see it's like May 29th, which is right around the time that Saturn enters the sign of Aries. The official, let's go, if I go to like the official moment, I think it might be even a day. Maybe it's the 20.
It's the 25th, I think.
Is it the 25th? Okay, because I'm like, I'm probably a little early. Yeah, okay, yeah, here we go. So I think if I back this up just a touch, I'm going by minutes. Let's go by hours.
I did like 50-year ahead readings this year, and May 25th was burned into my mind.
Oh, yeah.
Saturn will be moving into, yeah.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Oh my God. Okay, here we go. So I have the entrance at it's like 11:30 at night, May 24th. That means that East Coast time, it's May 25th. So yeah, May 25th is effectively the first day of Saturn into Aries. And from that moment forward, we have a Saturn-Neptune conjunction that's going to form over the course of the next year. We also have, again, through most of the month of May, Venus traveling back through Aries, where her retrograde began at the start of the month. If we go back, and I won't bring the clock back right now, but we're also dealing with, actually, I can just do it like this. So if I go back to the end of April and the beginning of May, you can see Mercury still traveling through Aries. So so it really is a lot of emphasis on that whole sign house of Aries coming out of Pisces. So that'll be where we start things off. Alex is going to start us with the cardinal sign. So what do you think for Aries this coming month, Alex?
One of the general ways I've been thinking, I think you have to talk about Neptune with this first ingress with Saturn. And one of the ways I've been thinking about this generally is the breaking of a spell. That there's sort of like, there's something I've been believing, maybe not wholly untrue, but like it no longer fits. It's become sort of like ephemeral, or it's become kind of like a virtual reality. And Saturn comes along and kind of pops that bubble. Is like, we're coming back down to earth in some way. And I wonder with Aries rising, if that has something, that general theme has something to do with who you think you are, who people see you to be, how you've transformed and shifted. And you've come off a long transit of both Neptune and Saturn in your 12th house. Neptune for the last 14 years, Saturn for the last couple of years since 2023. There's something about things that have been, I think, under the surface being shifted and remolded that are now coming to light in a way where you may not feel entirely like the new self you have become yet. You're sort of in the sort of fog of Neptune and Pisces a little bit. But Saturn comes in and really crystallizes and clarifies, this is who I am now. Not who I used to be, not who I thought myself to be, but this is who I am in this moment. So I think that this is a really crystallizing transit for a time that may have felt very reflective and had a lot of introversion to it, which may have not have been entirely comfortable for an Aries, but this sort of centers you, grounds you, and starts to say like, well, this is actually who I know myself to be. This sort of breaking of a old view of self-view that no longer quite fits, a sort of virtual reality that starts to move away.
Love that.
Yeah, beautiful. I was having similar thoughts, Alex. I was thinking to your point about the reflective period, Mars in Cancer, that we just finished up as well, kind of adding to that there's been a lot of reflection, a lot of inner work, a lot of like questioning about what do I need and what feels good to me. And now I think about Saturn in the first house as a moment of embodiment and perhaps the challenges that come with that embodiment. Like now I'm stepping into this new way of being, this new identity, and it feels really important and like almost spiritual perhaps. And there's Neptune. but there could be pushback. There could be, I'm thinking of like molting almost, like it's a little painful, it's a little challenging, but it's worth it. And so I'm thinking about that for Aries risings. Like, what are the challenges that come with embodying this new truth that I've come to understand about who I am and who I want to be?
I like that. Yeah, I wonder about with the first house and the sort of journey of character development or individuation that the first house often entails. I can't help but wonder what rigidities within the self concept will be dissolved with Saturn and Neptune coming along, because we know that Saturn as a god of polarization that puts two things on either side of like a polarity, that the boundary that seems to separate two things can dissolve. That's a huge Saturn Neptune, like a feature of Saturn Neptune, where if it's ideological or if it's about your self-concept, that certain kinds of rigid polarized views of yourself may be ready to dissolve, and you may be ready to hold two different things that are both true, or you may be ready to let go of something in favor of something else. But either way, I think the opportunity for some kind of softening and releasing of internal polarization or conflict is one of the great promises of this combination.
I love that, Adam. I have a good friend who's in Aries rising, and I see that happening right now. That exact story. It's really cool.
That's cool. Yeah. I love that. Well, let's move along to Taurus. We put Taurus on the ascendant. This is, I'm taking the fixed signs. So this places Saturn into Aries in the 12th house. Now, I happen to be a Taurus rising, so I think this is really interesting. I think that one of the things that can happen with any Venus rising sign, which would be, to some extent, Taurus and Libra, to some extent Pisces, with the exaltation ruler being Venus, is that the orientation of life is through harmonizing. It's like, where do I find streams of experience that are congruent with other streams of experience around me? Like the way that people are experiencing things, I want to harmonize with that, so there's always this concern for harmonization. But there are important experiences that need separation, not congruency. They need divergence, or something needs to go off in an independent direction, or may need to even stand apart somehow. The idea that could be a fulfilling, even blissful or rewarding experience, I think is foreign to a lot of people with Taurus rising or Libra rising. It's like, that's not intuitive. That's painful. That's difficult. But I think Saturn and Neptune in the 12th as a kind of unconscious blind spot for Tauruses may be about the benefits that are available through standing apart or divergence or separation, or even healthy expressions of individuality, as opposed to the version of self that is congruent with others. So I look at that and I say, okay, yeah, to whatever extent a Taurus may live with the myth that separation is painful, or individuation is lonely, or all about conflict, right? Because those are easy myths to live by. Some of those myths might be ready for dissolution, right? And then now standing apart may be something that, in a paradoxical way, empowers harmonization at an even deeper level. I think it's like that. Venus and Mars separate and come together over and over. So the separating might be a little harder for Tauruses, but that looks to me like a path of growth right now. Mm-hmm. So that's my take. What do you guys think?
Go for it, Jenna.
Okay. All right. I'm going. I was thinking something. You go, I go. No, I was thinking something kind of similar. I love that you brought up, the struggle of the Venus ruled people. Cause I'm like, yes. Right. And I was thinking about it from a similar angle. Like there's a a lot to say about like assumptions, the assumptions that we make that we don't even realize we're making when I think about the 12th house. And so when I see this combination in the 12th, I think about being able maybe to recognize those assumptions and how they limit you without you even realizing it. I just got done with a 12th house perfection year, and it taught me a lot about the 12th house. And of course, my experience is not the only way to understand it, but it was fascinating because I was so visible in this 12th house year. Like I came on this channel, right? And you wouldn't think about that for a 12th house year, but what it did was it provoked a lot within me about like feeling like an imposter or whatever, right? So for Taurus risings, I think about having that moment of recognition, like Saturn kind of bringing these assumptions into the reality, like, oh, I'm keeping myself apart because of these assumptions that I'm making.
Mhm.
So slightly different than how you were thinking about it, Adam, but on a similar note, like I think that we can, as Taurus risings, the Taurus risings in the room can maybe learn to let go a little bit of these assumptions by making them more conscious.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
One thing I've found over the years is that people appreciate distinct points of view and healthy expressions of power. And I think sometimes with a Venus ruled sign, what we mentioned before, Taurus, Libra, sometimes Pisces, there can be a sense of like, I'm always gauging what the other is going to say before I sort of make my move. And I think sometimes, what Saturn I think does so well is, again, like you were saying with Aries, it shows that polarity, right? There's an end to each stick, and there's a sense here of like sometimes it's okay for me to, when I stand in power and I have a very clear definition to who I believe I am or what I think I am or my beliefs, people appreciate it because there's a clear wall, there's a clear sort of bounce off point that they can have. And so I think that this could be a very, very empowering transit. But it might bring stuff up that's not entirely conscious at first. You may notice that it's already happening. That's what I noticed with the 12th house a lot. Like sometimes people notice these things happening in their life first before they see the internal happening. And so self-reflection here is really important with this type of 12th house transit, like where you're just like, well, that started to change in my outer life. Let me go in and see what's kind of shifting under the surface of my own sense of my own initiation and power.
Love that. Yeah. There's been a lot. I'm already with Neptune entering Aries in my own 12th as a Taurus rising. Many of these themes have already become apparent to me. And I love the first feedback we get when an outer planet goes into a new sign. It's like, yes, there's a personal level at which we experience it, but as an astrologer, I'm also like, ooh, I'm learning more about an archetype. Like I've never seen Neptune in Aries before. No one astrologer alive right now has seen it before, So anyway, let's go on to Gemini, and Dana's going to take us away with this one. I'm going to circle in the 11th here.
Okay, Gemini rising. So just a bit about what I'm thinking about with Saturn and Aries generally, the polarity between freedom and responsibility, or the connection even, not really a polarity. I'm thinking about how they go together. So in order to access your freedom, you have to be responsible for yourself. You have to understand what you want. You have to be able to go get it. You have to be willing to say no to other things. And in the context of the 11th house, what are you striving for? You've got Jupiter in your first house, Gemini risings, that's been there for a hot minute. I feel like you've really been working towards something. And this 11th house moment is like, it made me think of like those heat mirages. In like on a hot day, you're getting there, like you're so close and you can see it, and then it kind of dissipates, or there's a new challenge. So in other words, I think you're going to be working through like a little whack-a-mole situation almost, maybe, and something you're trying to kind of bring to fruition. Don't quit, keep at it, because you're learning something through these obstacles. And I think we could say that about every rising sign, but specifically for Gemini risings, I see you working towards something, and there's, we got to chip away at the marble to get there, but don't give up, because you will get there eventually.
I love that, Dan. Yeah. I think a lot too about, on the theme of polarity, no one does polarity better than Gemini in a lot of ways. There's this and that, and this and that, and this and that. And so I wonder here too about, if there have been very strong feelings either way about certain people in your social networks, your groups, the groups that surround you, professional networks, that's how I tend to think of the 11th house in relation to the 10th. If there's a way of sort of, it doesn't have to be this or that. Neptune might be a little bit of a confusing energy at first here as Saturn comes in, because it's like, well, usually it's either this or that, and this is how I work things out by sort of playing the light against the dark. And Neptune is the exact opposite of that. Neptune doesn't see the polarities. Neptune doesn't see the light and dark. Neptune just sees it all as one thing. And so it might actually be an interesting opportunity to experiment with a different way of thinking, particularly about the people who support you in your career in some way, or have supported you or elevated you in some way in your career, to maybe not see it necessarily as good or bad, right or wrong, but like, is there I don't even know necessarily a middle ground, but like maybe a gray area that hasn't been viewed before, right? But instead of seeing the exact end of each pole, like, yeah, but there's a gray area here. There's an ambiguous area here that maybe needs some clarification, or maybe that gray area is a little bit of relief. Like, it doesn't have to be as black and white as I thought it was.
I think about, excuse me, this place of allies and friends, benefactors, groups of people that we have some professional or social connections with, usually that are also connected to some of our dreams and aspirations. And here I just wonder if some of the people that we have classically seen as enemies are becoming allies, or if there is some kind of paradigm change happening both socially and maybe professionally, such that certain kinds of divides that have existed previously are falling away. There's been a lot of astrologers have talked about Saturn Neptune in relation to the falling of the Berlin Wall when it was in Capricorn in the late 80s or early 90s or whatever it was. And I just wonder, like, what kinds of ideological walls are being deconstructed for Geminis, or what kinds of social boundaries or barriers are appearing or disappearing, and therefore what new dreams or ambitions are possible, and what new paths or routes to get there are appearing. So I'm really curious to hear from all of our Geminis about how you experience this over the next year, because I could see there being almost like a parting of the Red Sea. There's a safe path to travel through to get out of some place that has maybe felt like entrapping or enclosing. And that could be mentally, or it could be in a literal environment. But leaving some place that's felt overly polarized feels like a really promising part of this transit for Geminis.
I love that, Adam.
Yeah. For those of you who haven't yet seen it, Chris Brennan and Nick Dagan-Bess did, I think it was like 8 hours. I have not yet watched all of it, but I watched like maybe the first hour of it on Saturn Neptune throughout history. And they talked in the first hour easily, I think, about some of the key themes that Saturn and Neptune has evoked historically. And, right along, and to me, there's a personal reflection where something like the Berlin Wall is a good example of Saturn Neptune. I think Richard Tarnas was the first person I heard in Cosmos and Psyche talk about that. And it's connected because personally, psychologically, where there are barriers or walls or polarizations between things, which Saturn represents, the Neptunian effect can dissolve those things and suddenly make a kind of connection across a previously existing boundary now possible. And so the fluidity, it's a bit, in some ways, it's a bit like Mercury, who can travel freely across boundaries. So that, I think that's really exciting for all signs. Okay, let's move on to Cancer. And Alex, take us away.
Well, first of all, Cancer risings, we're all going to thank the sweet baby Jesus that Mars is out of your first house. Let's just celebrate together for a moment that that's happened.
Yeah. Right.
Wow, that was an interesting transit to talk about for the last few months. But like, here comes this one. I actually want to bring in Jupiter here for a second, because Jupiter is going to move into your first house, but June 9th. And then, especially as it moves out of the square with Saturn, is really going to start to pick up some steam in that sign. Mars, having been in your first house for a long time, has sort of been tearing up at the seams of your identity and who you believe you are, and the captain of the ship, so to speak, that character that steers the ship of your life is changing in some way, and probably in a way that might have felt uncomfortable with Mars, especially. Jupiter starts to come in and restitch that up in the next month or so, and excuse me, in June, and moving through the rest of next year. So, or into next year. So this also brings up Saturn into your 10th house. And this is really interesting because I wonder if this shift in your identity, the beginnings of this sort of restitching of your identity and who you know yourself to be, and how you want to sort of appear to the world and be in the world, is also shifting a sort of a way you're viewing your career, or your career in some way. Like, Saturn and Neptune, I could see it going to a couple of ways. And I'd love to hear you guys talk about what you see with this too. I could see the sort of, I've been disillusioned with my job for a while. I haven't enjoyed it. I've been sort of like disappointed in some way. Saturn comes along, and like we were talking about with Aries, kind of pops the bubble and says like, yeah, you have felt like that. And let's take some concrete action. It's okay to say like, I don't like this and I want to do something else, to have those sort of pulls, right? And there could be a sense of like a whole new structure being brought in around your job, something that feels a little bit more like it's connective and compassion. Cancers are so wonderful at that sense of deep compassion and care, that there's a feeling coming in here of like, with Neptune kind of softening Saturn and saying like, you know what, why don't we soften the boundaries a little bit? Why don't we soften up the rigidity of what we think this should be or shouldn't be, or where it should go or what it should be, and allow ourselves to just feel this sense of like that we can be compassionate and caring and bring those qualities of ourselves that cancers bring so easily into the work. So those are two ways I could see that going. But, obviously with the archetypal combination, there are a million turns of the wheel we could do.
I don't know why, like, because I'm usually like best case scenario astrology girl, but I was thinking about the phrase "heavy is the head that wears the crown." When I looked at this, I was thinking about Neptune as like everything's possible, like it's all of everything everywhere all at once, right? Like you can have whatever you want, and Saturn's like, all right, let's figure it out. Oh, okay, there's challenges with like wrangling the chaos, right? Like that can be when it's up to you to make the choices, like that can be really great to have that kind of freedom and autonomy and agency. And also like you are the one, like it falls on you, right? And so I don't think that has to be a bad thing, but I think like the weight of responsibility, I don't want to make it sound overly negative because I don't think it has to be, but there is something to say, I think, about making definitive choices about who I am out in the world, what I'm doing in career that could, there's a way in which like you have to pay for it. God, that sounds so negative. I really don't want it to sound like that, but
there's a consequential part of it though.
Thank you. Yes, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm looking at this from the standpoint of Saturn and Neptune coming together. For some cancers, this can be about the larger, let's say, industry that you work in, and the kinds of institutional or industry-wide changes that are happening, because the Saturn-Neptune dynamic in the 10th can be about larger social forces that are somehow shaping the narrative around your career right now. For example, my wife is a Cancer rising, Ashley. You guys on the channel have seen her a few times recently. And some conversations around how herbalists will be professionally credentialed or recognized is taking place in some sections of the herbal world right now. I'm just thinking of the fact that those started for Ashley. She noticed them starting as soon as Neptune entered Aries. Oh, there it is in her 10th house. Right now, there's this sea change happening with respect to certain aspects of the herbal world and industry, right? I could see you could list any other profession. I could see something happening in the workplace, in the organization of the company. The best interpretation would be that certain kinds of barriers or boundaries are dissolving that make forward progress or pioneering or some new entrepreneurial impulses more possible or likely. On the other hand, I'm reminded of the fact that Saturn and Neptune can have people doubling down on like irrational, polarized perspectives, you know, so that a polarized state, Saturn, can become almost superstitious, you know, Neptune. And so I just wonder about what interesting battles as well as dissolvings of boundaries are taking place in the larger professional world for Cancers right now.
Yeah.
Right. Let me move us ahead to Leo. This one's for Alex, our resident Leo rising. So we're looking at this gathering of Aries planets in the 9th house. Now, to me, Saturn, Neptune in the 9th is a really nice placement for these two planets. Not that it isn't without its challenges. You know, those are there too. But the reason I like this so much is that this house is traditionally about our the way in which we learn and grow philosophically, intellectually, through education, but also spiritually. How, you know, the process of illumination from within, you know, enlightenment. This has been depicted by the 9th house for thousands of years in astrology. So when I see Saturn and Neptune coming together in this house, I think about ridding ourselves of core illusions about who we are or about the universe or reality that have kept us apart from elements of ourselves or others or the world. And now it's time to release certain kinds of illusions or barriers or, you know, states of philosophical polarity. I look at this and I go, well, this is a wonderful time for certain paradoxes to really seep in and permeate to great effect. Like, there's nothing better in a sense in the process of being illuminated than letting go of hard dualities that keep us apart from a larger and more comprehensive truth. So Saturn Neptune to me here, it might be indicating that there's a softening and an opening philosophically that is also paradoxically empowering. It's like, oh, I've let go of something, or I'm entertaining a broader perspective. Certain rigidities are being released, and that paradoxically gives me great incentive to act or to do something new or to move in a new direction. I think it's also about, with Mars kind of just going through the opposition with Pluto, I think this is also about new ideas of what Leos are capable of. Like, what can I, what, it's very, I see it as potentially very empowering for Leos. And also for some Leos, if, you know, some Leos could be getting feedback about how to be more without necessarily being louder or more overpowering, you know, like a dimmer switch that's being developed if necessary. But then the last thing I'll say is just that the Saturn-Neptune sea change in the 9th house may also come at a cost, right? There could be, it's painful sometimes to have our eyes open to things. And so maybe a little bit of a painful or stressful shift philosophically that's underway, but that I think ultimately will open a deeper, more heart-centered view of self and world. That's what I've got.
That is my life right now.
Yeah.
Literally my life. Thank you for
Yay.
that reading, Adam. It was awesome.
Yeah, I was nodding vigorously to everything you were saying. I'm just, first of all, thinking about the Leo risings that I know, but then also like the phrase that I had in mind before we ever got on this call was like a truth you can't unknow. Like there's some knowing, there's some deep awareness that you can't just, it's fundamentally changed things, and you can't proceed as you would have before because now you know this truth. And what that truth is going to be different for every person. But I'm also thinking about the fact that we just got done with this epic 12th house transit of Mars in your 12th house. So something is coming to the surface. Like, you know, something now that you must recalibrate, right? And I think like what Adam said, it is very freeing, but the challenge of it is stepping into that new way of being, because it's never easy to change, right? Like we like to be comfortable. And so for Leo risings, like, yeah, it might feel a little uncomfortable to really embody this new realization, but it is going to be liberating. It's going to be freeing, and you're going to be able to find more of that the more that you step into it.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I've got nothing. That was
Totally.
awesome. But it's true. You know, that is manifesting for me. There's certain ways I don't want to share right now. It's just more private. But you know, it's a little bit like that breaking of the spell I was talking about. And Adam, I'm glad you brought this up because I was thinking about it on my walk this morning before we got on the call. When there is a breaking of a spell, there's a split second where it's like you don't want to see the spell that what just got broken. You don't want to see the reality that just got put in front of your face. And there can be a doubling down on, but this is the way it was. I just have to believe the illusion because it was safer or more familiar or whatever than the hard reality. But there's something so empowering and grounding and ultimately stabilizing about the truth. That's true for you. I'm not saying, you know, I'm settling back now, I feel, into a lot of my own truths, things that I may have lost along the way. I might not even have known were there. And that does involve a sort of sorrow in a way of like the virtual reality of Neptune that I created around me to keep me safe or to keep me feeling familiar or whatever it was is not reality. And there's just that moment where you really want to hold on to that with both hands and try to keep it because it felt so familiar. But when you let it go, I think one of the, you know, just to finish with Saturn, that's so important to remember is Saturn is not just taking things away. It's opening the space for something bigger and more broad and expansive to come through, and especially with Neptune. And I think that if we can let go of what we thought things were for how things are, there's a whole new set of possibilities, a whole new, like, more grounded, stable, even maybe more mature life that's awaiting on the other side of that.
I hear echoes of the upcoming Jupiter-Saturn square as well, where there's always with Jupiter-Saturn, which we've talked about going back now to the end of the year in 2024 when they squared, there's always a way in which we're rebuilding structures of coherence that give our life a deeper sense of meaning and purpose. And when it encounters Saturn, the reality sort of principle of Saturn says, if the new meaning for life is going to take shape, then this reform of a structure needs to be in place. And it's really fascinating to see that happening with Neptune, which implies not only the building of new structures, but this necessary dissolution of old ones. It's going to be a powerful square this June. Anyway, that was just to kind of segue into Virgo. Let me put Virgo up. Okay, here we go. And bringing Saturn and Neptune into the 8th.
Here we go, Virgos. Okay, I'm thinking about loss and control. I think that's a theme we could really talk about for every rising sign with the Saturn-Neptune archetypal dynamic, but it's like underscored for me with this 8th house. It could be about renegotiating like the terms of your agreements, right? Understanding where maybe people have taken advantage of you, or maybe like the word enmeshment and entanglement kind of came up for me as well in reflecting on this. Untangling yourself from these entanglements that are not balanced anymore, are not working anymore, have felt comfortable, but are consuming. I mean, I think that Neptune can feel that way. It can feel a little like I've lost myself. I'm like floating in an ocean on a, pool noodle, SOS, help. And Saturn could be the moment where you're like, okay, no more. Like we're not doing this anymore. And that can be very tough to do, to set the boundary, to say no. Especially when, God, you might be under the impression that you really need this agreement, this arrangement, this entanglement, whatever it might be. I think Saturn's going to challenge you to see what you can do by yourself, maybe to kind of prove to yourself like, hey, I don't have to like rely on other people to help me in situations where maybe you don't need that help. And so what else am I thinking about? Yeah, just boundaries, how we merge and share, and like that extraction piece. Like, how can I kind of create some good boundaries so that I know where I stand, I know what I have to offer, I know what I have to give, and I'm not doing more than I really can give to this situation.
I love that, Dana. You know, picking up on that point, it's something I actually talk with Scorpios a lot about, but I think it applies to this idea that you're talking about, is this idea of concentric boundaries. Like, people earn their way into certain sort of spaces in your life, and sometimes they earn their way out, you know, with their behavior, whatever they're doing. They become disrespectful. The friendship starts to decay in some way, and they start to, you start to move them back out along those sort of boundaries. But I think that there's something here around exactly what you're saying. There can be a tendency, I'm just again speaking with the resident 3 planets in Virgo, to be so of service that you sort of blur that. You blur how far people have gotten in towards your inner circle. And there might be, Saturn might come along and say, like, let's just make an assessment of like how have these, how have these entanglements or these enmeshments, do I want them or do I not? Because that's what Aries will really help with. Do I want this? Do I desire this? It's something that's good for me to have. And, that can be a very important point for Virgos. And it can also be very liberating. I know, just having had Neptune in the 8th house for a long time, it can begin with that feeling of feeling a little lost. Like, I don't quite know how I interact energetically or who I am or where I'm going, but there's a great opportunity here for rebuilding that slowly over the next few years, particularly while Saturn's in Aries. So I think it's ultimately a very empowering transit, but it might involve that, again, that kind of seeing of things that are tough to see at first, but can ultimately be liberating.
When I look at this one, I think about what, I think a lot about the endings that when I think of Saturn, Neptune in the 8th in particular, I think of death. Like the death card in tarot could be metaphorical, doesn't have to be just literal. Saturn and Neptune about hard things that are dissolving, things that crystallize, things that are becoming being released. So the soul releasing from the body, for example, comes to my mind with Saturn and Neptune in the 8th house. When things end or expire or are naturally released, there's often a way in which we become aware of things that are eternal in contrast to things that are mortal. We it's like the first encounters I had with death as a kid growing up, a preacher's kid, were pretty early on, because I was present at funerals that my dad was giving, at least 15, 20 times a year. So, and I remember as a little boy, like, that person was alive and now they're not here. Their body's here. Where are they? Like, and of course I had the backdrop of they've gone to be with God, or, now I believe in transmigration. So I'm thinking, where is their journey taking them next, or whatever. But there's nothing like endings to make us aware of things that endure versus things that pass, and kind of holding a broader perspective in our lives because we've had a meaningful encounter with death or loss or transience and impermanence. And I think about those things. Granted, they're a little heavy, but in Aries, the idea is that those things that fade or dissolve can actually ignite some kind of new beginning. Because the sign of Aries is so catalyzing of creativity and growth and light, I could see things dissolving being a great source of inspiration right now, and like awakening creatively for Virgos. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'll just add that. All right, let's move on to
Dana.
Dana's our Libra rising. So Dana, this is your reading. Cardinal signs, go for it.
All right. So for Libra risings, we have Saturn moving into your 7th house. Again, we could go with the subject of boundaries. We could go with subjects of easy, low-hanging fruit here is boundaries in relationships, or places where you feel like there has been a lack of boundaries, or maybe becoming too merged with someone or something. It could be in primary romantic relationships, it could be others, but you tend there's a sense here of like, whoa, wait a second, I'm just gonna like put a little, this needs a boundary here to demarcate where I am and where you are. It can be about dissolving of different kinds of partnerships. It could be about that. That's one way you could interpret it for sure. But I think it's also the meaning of Aries I always come back to, which I get from Liz Green's Astrology of Fate, is the reclaiming of power, the reclaiming of something that has been taken from you in some way. You feel has been taken from you in some way, or maybe you just feel you've lost, taking it back. And on a more positive sense, something I think for myself a lot is one of the most important ways we show ourselves self-love is by allowing other people to love us. And that sense of like not allowing keeping the boundaries too much, right? Where Neptune can come in here is like, there's so many boundaries. I'm not allowing you to love me because I have to do it all. That can be a very Libra thing to do. I have to take care of you. I have to make sure you're balanced. I. There's a sense here. It's just like, what if we soften up the boundaries, and in order to love yourself, let other people love you, like reclaim from the past, whatever, God knows so many of us have wounds that tell us we're not lovable for who we are. And if we reclaim our power from that, then there's a sense of like, I'm loving myself by letting you love me. And so that's just kind of where my brain went with this one.
Oof.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm going to go next just because I won't make Dana speak to her own chart next. So I feel like the Saturn and Neptune can break down barriers that have existed maybe unconsciously for some time in key relationships for Librans. And now the tensions that have been there that for Libras can be expertly avoided through tact and care and sensitivity and intelligence, which is all like the wonderful skills of Librans. They don't have to be avoided anymore because there's some meaningful opening for that. I mean, there's Venus, right, as well. For some diplomacy to take place within a relationship and the edges of that relationship or the tensions or conflicts in that relationship, but for there to be like an opening for, oh, this is okay. This isn't actually threatening. This is promising. This division is actually a potential of some kind creatively. I think those are really exciting because when you feel in a relationship like there's certain places you just don't go because you know that the conflicts are like there's irreconcilable differences. I feel like all relationships, mature relationships, exist with respect for places where you're just not going to find resolution and you just live with it. It's like, it's okay. We have certain differences and we just sort of we just don't go there and try to change each other, And like, I think that's healthy. On the other hand, sometimes if we do that for too long, we'll miss opportunities to allow ourselves to be influenced or changed positively and opened by the other. Yeah. And not all irreconcilable differences need to remain that way forever. Sometimes they are ready to change or grow. So I look at this great potential for Librans right now to open to certain kinds of creative tensions or dialogues in relationships that might be uncomfortable, but might be more positive than initially thought. Now, the other thing would be projection. I think Saturn, Neptune in the 7th, we have to be very careful. Anyone who's like, like the image that comes to my mind would be like, and I grew up, no offense to anyone, but there were like, we call them like church ladies, like Saturday Night Live, the church lady or whatever. I think it was Dana Carvey that did that, but they would be so assured of what was right, that they had no real sensitivity to how jerky and self-righteous they were when they told you that you weren't doing something right, because they were morally puritanical. And I think, sometimes it's like, I had a pretty good understanding with some of the church ladies when I grew up that there were people who were projecting their own sense of being bad or sinful or dirty inside, and they would project that onto other people by constantly picking out other people's flaws. I mean, I intuitively understood that's what was happening by the time I was like 7, being around enough people in a church, Yeah. I think that we have to be careful. For Librans, be careful of projections. And the promise here is you can bring them back, and it can be this part of yourself that you come to accept and love and even cherish. On the other hand, Saturn Neptune in the seventh can also mean that other people are going to project something onto you. And so, it can go either way. And is that really me? Do I want to accept that? Is that what I am? For example, Dana's an astrologer. Could I see Saturn and Neptune being like not that this will happen to you, Dana, but could someone say, Dana, you're a witch? Not that I think witches are necessarily bad either, but you know what I mean? Like it's like, ooh, you're a pagan, or there's something bad about what you do because you're an astrologer. See, those projections with Saturn, Neptune in the seventh could be directed at you. Someone who has a superstition that says, oh, I'm projecting this onto you. Now I feel afflicted by your issue,
Yeah.
So maybe those things are something to watch for, and disentanglement from projection is something that also comes to my mind.
Oh, those are so good. And if someone did say that to me, I'd say, yes, I am. Correct.
Right. Exactly.
You're right. I mean, I don't have a ton to add. I was thinking about meaningful struggles. You guys really nailed so many beautiful, ways that this could manifest. I would say Libra risings, pay attention to where you feel limited in relationship and you think, well, this is just how it is, and then push back on that. Because I think when you're feeling that constriction in partnership, whether it's romantic or whatever it is, whatever the case, that's a moment where you could get to that opening if you go there. So that's the challenge that Saturn is presenting. Like, can you, and sometimes, as Adam said, like, we do just need to kind of let it go and let it be what it is. But if you're feeling really limited and you can't let it go, see if you can get into a dialogue about it and talk about what you want. Don't say, well, what do you think? Like, that's not how you start this conversation. Start with, here's what I'm thinking and what I'm lacking and what I'm wanting. How can we make that happen? And see what happens from there. It's very different than at least for me, how I would approach a conversation like that. But it's an invitation for all of us, Libra risings.
Yeah, it's the Venus ruled sign again. It's not necessarily the easiest thing to frame things that way. I appreciate that you're encouraging that. It could be appropriate for some of the Libras out there, really. Let's go to, yeah, sorry. I'm next with Scorpio.
Adam, I just want to say quickly that you've got the church lady in my head now, and I can't get it out.
Exactly.
I miss Dana Carvey so much.
A few of them were my Sunday school teachers, so.
So I guess personal for you, but it was just something Saturday Night Live for me.
Oh my gosh. All respect, by the way.
Yes.
It's like I grew up being taught to respect these characters, and I actually had parents who would sometimes, they had good enough senses of humor that they would be like, how's your Sunday school teacher? Because they knew, like, so it was a pretty warm environment, all things considered. But anyway, so Scorpios got this Saturn Neptune dynamic starting off in your sixth house. Let's just get the simplest and I think probably most problematic interpretation out of the way, which is that this may be a time that's quite, let's call it psychosomatic for Scorpios. And the reason I say that is because when Saturn and Neptune come together in the sixth house, let's say that there have been subtle things making you sick. Now, the sickness doesn't have to be the world's worst thing. It could be just chronic issues that don't really go away or that nag psychologically, mentally, physically, any level of discomfort, frustration, agitation, mentally, emotionally, physically. Suddenly, you start to see the actual reasons for the symptoms. This is something that might be really helpful, although it could mean that something is becoming more acute. The reason I say that is because Saturn will take us, like Neptune in the sixth might start manifesting in terms of like a greater awareness of subtle things that are frustrating or that provoke sickness or difficulty. Saturn coming into Neptune can say, let's make you aware of exactly what they are. Let's give you some crystallized insight into the actual tangible things that are subtly bothering your system, the foods or the irritants, the allergens or, like stuff like that. So the difficulty of this is that subtle irritants can become more acute. But your awareness of what they are and ability to become illuminated about them and make changes may also become more acute. And that's the promise. I think your ability to address subtle things that have been bothersome or painful or difficult or burdensome or draining or exhausting on any level is going to be one of the great takeaways from this. But that can mean in the process that things get a little worse before they get better. So that's my take. I think the other thing here is whatever is or isn't worth, always with the sixth house, right? What is or isn't worth sacrificing for. There's work in the sixth. So what is worth the sacrifice? I think that's a good question for this transit as well.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. This is Libra moon, Libra rising. No, you.
Okay, here we go. Yes, I was thinking about health stuff. I was thinking about something that you have to do that seems like a pain in the ass, right? Like there's just something that you need to attend to that maybe doesn't look so fun. That's the sixth house. That's Saturn. But I think if you can, actually, let me say it like this. I think one challenge with Saturn and Aries, generally speaking, is the potential for burnout. Like, I'm going to go hard and I'm going to get this shit done. I'm going to do it all. And there's a lot of resolve, which can be great, but you can go too hard too fast. I think with the sixth house, like we want to be really cognizant of that because we're talking about the realm of your health, at least from one way of looking at this. So what can you, and even if it's nothing to do with your health, if it's like Adam was saying, something that's just like, oh, okay, I got to like put on my bootstraps or whatever the expression is and go do this thing. How can you like do it step by step, piece by piece, 1% more every day so that you're not overwhelming yourself and you're not burning out? Because I think Neptune could also speak to that too. Again, that kind of like oceanic, like, oh my God, there's so many things to do. Where do I even begin? Let Saturn help you and just like one little tiny baby step at a time.
I love that.
Thanks.
I love that so much. I love what you guys are saying. So I was, the last time Saturn was in Aries was I think 1997 to 1999, around that time. And I was thinking of a lot of the movies that came out around that time. There were a lot of like the uncommon hero or the sort of like the person who was picked on coming back and having, an empowerment moment. Like in my favorite movie of all time, Romeo and Michelle's High School Reunion, which is one of my very favorite movies ever. And they come back, at the end, they're sort of like the picked on girls in high school, and they go to the reunion and they have this whole moment at the end where they tell the popular girl, like, we don't care if you like us, Christy, because we don't like you. Like there's a sense of like, they just kind of stand up to her. And anyways, you look at like Armageddon or like Deep Impact, there's like the sense of like people who just feel like an everyday person having to do some monumental heroic thing. Bruce Willis has got to go up and like blow the asteroid up or whatever it was, one of those movies. And I think to take it out of the realm of drama here, there's a sense of you are stronger than you think you are. There might be a sense with that Neptune of like, there's an overwhelming something. There's oh my God, this ocean of holy shit just starts to pour in. But there's a sense of like, but wait a second, with the proper sort of checklist, the proper training, the proper ideas, I can get through this. I'm strong. I'm capable. I can stand for myself. I can do much more than I thought. I could stand in situations that I would have thought would have been, terrifying. Just like Romeo and Michelle do. So there's a sense where you can really like, you might actually discover a lot of power and strength. I was saying it's entirely easy. Sixth house transits are not entirely easy, but it's that sense of like, wow, there's a lot of power in me that I didn't realize was there. But to really honor Saturn's sort of like bullet points will help, because the Neptune comes in, is just like, yo, you just have to go up there and save the planet. It's like, how do I do that? Oh my God. God. Anyways, yeah. So that's what I'm thinking.
Excellent. Move on to Sagittarius, where we see all of these Aries planets, Saturn entering Aries in your fifth.
Okay. I mean, the very first thing I think about is children questioning authority. That's not going to be true for everybody, of course, but it's right there. So it's something to consider. If you have children in your life, that they might be kind of exploring their personal freedom, and that might be bringing up things for you about like what you're okay with and how do you respond to that and how do you let them. I think that's an important part of raising a child, is like giving them an appropriate amount of freedom and letting them kind of navigate and figure out figure that out, right? So I think for some of us, that's what's going to be on the table. But then I also thought about kind of similar to what we talked about the ninth house, actually, that but through the lens of like what you do for fun and your own creative joy, that there's a death and rebirth here, that you've outgrown some way of expressing yourself or something you do to, again, bring joy to your life and pleasure, that's kind of run its course. And it's like, okay, so now what? There's a rebuilding here. So it's like you're on a map and you're creating the map as you go. I guess that's kind of true for every rising sign, but for Sag risings, it's about what brings me joy, what brings me fulfillment, what do I want to offer, what do I want to give to the world? Now that this other way of doing and being and creating is like not really for me anymore. So it's a cool time to like lean into the Neptunian sort of like transcendent vibes, right? And similar really to what we were saying a moment ago, like, you don't have to figure it out all at once, especially with something creative. And I'm not just talking about arts and crafts, obviously, like we all are creative beings. That's what being a human is. You find it out as you go. It's a process of trial and error and experimentation. Don't get in your head about it. Just try stuff out and see how it feels. That's what I'm thinking.
Mm-hmm. There's I think there's a sense here for me about, the taking back of my own power around wanting what's creatively fulfilling to me, maybe a taking back of sexual power with the fifth house. There's a sense too of like, I don't know quite how to say this, creativity can feel so ephemeral. Like people say, be creative, it's just like, I don't know, I'm just how do I be creative? What do I create? And that's Neptune in a lot of ways, because Neptune is so expansive that it's like all of this abstract stuff can come to you, and it's just kind of like floating around in the ether. And Saturn comes in and it's just like, yes, well, you've got to paint the painting or write the book or start the blog, or Saturn is usually like the not fun stuff, but that has to be done in order to get something into form, into creation. So I think that it may have felt with just Neptune there for the last couple of months, like there's a sense of like, I don't know, I want to do all these creative things, but I don't know how to begin or where to start. Or the Saturn comes in and is just like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get you a this. We're going to say this. We're going to start you on this. We're going to do this. And it's like, sometimes like that can feel overwhelming too, but then you start to relax, like, okay. Like, I know, like when people have come like that into my life, I'm always like, oh, thank God, you know what to do. You're going to give me a list of what to do, and I can just go down the checklist. And that can be really, really helpful in sort of like embodying and manifesting something that might feel intangible into form.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this from the standpoint of, I know I have a few Sag risings in my life, and one of the things that is pretty common for Sagittarians is the myth of meaning. Is like, it's like Jupiter's your ruling planet, and Sagittarians will go through these peaks and valleys of sensing or feeling that life has inherent purpose, that the universe or reality is guiding us, or God or goddess or whatever, and valleys of despair, or the feeling that nothing makes any sense, or like a nihilistic, even like an encounter with nihilism. It's not uncommon for Sagittarius to swing between those things, because you're wrestling with it as your ascendant ruler. You're wrestling with a planet that is all about purpose. And so the binary is purpose versus some sense of being without direction or purpose. And the two are always, they're moving fluidly. Taoists tell us this, all these mystical traditions tell us that you got to get lost to find your way, all, like that kind of thing. Saturn, Neptune in the fifth, I could see as connected to, like you got Jupiter. I'm just looking at Jupiter about to enter the eighth for Sagittarius. And I'm thinking, yeah, there's going to be some really life altering changes with your sense of direction and purpose. And there may be a period of time where the Saturn, Neptune in the fifth, and Jupiter entering the eighth feels like loss or grief or transience or impermanence are having you call your purpose into question, or the purposefulness of life itself. Some level of despair or disillusionment might be a part of the journey here. But then through that meaningful encounter, like I think Sages are good at rebounding and, recovering. There's so much about that kind of redemption with Sag that I feel like creatively this ends up being maybe very redeeming and awakening, but there may be some deeper level of like doubt or a crisis of faith or something that has to happen before this new creative chapter of life can begin. All right, moving into our last 3 signs, let's get into Capricorn. And hopefully there's like, not that that was too big of a bummer, but like, I think it's good for each of us sort of present a different angle. So like if one of the angles feels more uplifting or aligned, pick that one. But for sure, there'll be some people who, as you're listening, a little bit more of the shadow take is appropriate because you're dealing with heavy stuff. So we try to make sure we kind of mix things up that way. But, and not that you need to go and have a crisis of faith this moment if you're not having one.
Where's my crisis of faith?
Oh, shoot. I should really be in turmoil.
Let me make one. Oh, my God.
All right. Capricorns, you've got this Aries energy with Saturn entering Aries in your 4th.
So, Adam, I was reflecting on some of the ways I think you've been talking about this in some of your videos has been the dark and the light. Of just Saturn, the Lord of Darkness, moving into the sign of the increasing light. And I was reflecting actually with a client last week in the reading that this is coming up on the Saturn return of my coming out. So I came out in 1997 when Saturn was in Aries, trining my sun, my ascendant ruler. And I came out. I made the dark light. I made something that was under the surface, over the surface, right? And Pluto was also conjunct my Mercury. That's a different story. But there's something for me here about in the 4th house, which I think is just like the most private space of the chart, like in your most inner sanctum. There's something about something being illuminated coming out of that private sphere into maybe a more visible sphere that in the 4th house doesn't always feel as comfortable as it could, because there's a sense with Aries of like, I want things to be known and I want to take action on them and I want them to be seen and I want to be seen. And Saturn is a little bit like the vampire in the sunlight. Like, no, I don't want to be seen. I want my sunglasses. I want to stay in my little cave and just hang out. And so I wonder here about, in encountering Neptune, if there's something, a low-hanging fruit here would be something like maybe escapism, a tendency towards escapism in the family, or escapism or addiction in the family. And there's something that's seen about that or known about that, or something is revealed about that is a little bit like those confronting truths we've talked about before. But there's also a way where you begin to sort of reclaim and pull back your power in some way from that visibility. Like I've been thinking a lot about this lately, the idea of like, some truths are hard to say, to speak, to bring them out. But when you do, I mean, I know for mine, it's hard at first, but you feel a lot better. Mm-hmm. You just feel a lot better because you're no longer in that space where you feel like you have to be in this, the hat over your eyes and the sunglasses on and being very protective of everything. There's a sense where it's like, it's okay for this to be known, even if sometimes it's difficult. So that's kind of the tact I was taking with the 4th house here for this.
Yeah. I don't think I've told you guys this, but I was born in 1989. So I have Pluto and Neptune conjunct, not Pluto, Saturn. Saturn is what we're talking about. Saturn and Neptune conjunct in my 4th house, in Capricorn. But yeah, it's been interesting to think about that dynamic, like through my lens, just like living it and then thinking about it in Aries. I can say, I think you're going to be dealing with some confrontations with family and, this interesting dichotomy that we keep talking about in different lenses, like the juxtaposition between like feeling separate, but then finding the togetherness in that separateness. So I think you're going to be challenged through feeling like you're separate or they won't get me. And that might be specifically with family, worrying about like where you might not be accepted. But then if you're able to actually go there, you might find that there's a lot more in common than you think. Again, that image of like the walls coming down. You will be surprised how many of those walls you created for yourself and were really only there for you. You were the only one. And as soon as you let other people in, you see like that wall was an illusion, like that I created because I was afraid. And, fear is a very Saturnine thing. That's kind of what I'm thinking about. And I wrote in my notes, what are you on the brink of doing that scares the shit out of you? maybe do it. Like, try it, but you don't, like we've said with other signs, you don't need to go 100% right away. Like, you can kind of put your baby toe in, see how it feels, like do it in a way that feels safe to your nervous system. But get out of your comfort zone a little bit as well.
Yeah, I like that. I wonder about hurts that have divided us, that have ancestral roots, and are there walls or barriers or boundaries that have been created because of history, because of hurts, that are dissolving? I think of the most classic example of this in my client practice taking place. Neptune or Saturn transit a fourth house planet or go into the fourth house, and a grandparent passes. That grandparent maybe was, I'm speaking now to a fourth house transit I had when my grandfather passed. My grandfather, for a long period of time, was an abusive alcoholic father and spouse. He became sober later in life, but there was a tremendous release for my dad when he passed. That release allowed for healing to take place and for the dissolution of old wounds that, were still there, although they're not as a conscious part of your everyday life as they are when you're in a family and you're 11 years old, right? But my dad in his 60s experiences the death of his dad, and it is dissolving of so many tensions. So, excuse me. I just wonder about what kinds of historic oppositions are melting for Capricorns that can fertilize a new soil, new cycles of growth with respect to things like your private life, your inner sphere, your family history, and that more intimate sphere of life in general.
Well said.
Let us. Oh, Alex, did you go yet? I can't remember. You led this one off.
Yeah.
My bad. All right.
It's okay.
Okay, here we go. So for Aquarians, we have the meeting of Saturn and Neptune in your third house, and a lot of emphasis on this house with the retrogrades, the solar eclipse. I think this is a fascinating place for Saturn and Neptune to join. When I think of the third house, I think about a house of wisdom. And it's interesting that in the ancient world, there were places that were called houses of wisdom or houses of learning or houses of education. And the reason that the word house or home was used as a preface is because the goddess was thought to have a kind of ruling influence over the process of learning. Her learning is not so much about the ultimate principles of transcendental reality, like the ninth house, where you're learning about Brahma or something like that. It's more like, how do you talk to gemstones, and how do you talk to the river? Or, it's very animistic, and all of the spiritual principles are there, but they're embodied in this matrix of life and relationships. And so the kind of wisdom that we get in the third house is this embodied wisdom that will impart spiritual principles, but within the context of living a life. It's very street smart, earthly, village life that the third house goddess presides over in terms of learning. I think this is really fascinating because Pluto in Aquarius is so high-minded in your first house right now, so big and, huge conceptual stuff. And yet in the third house, there's this other emphasis on learning taking place that's very embodied, very local, very immediate, very physical. And I wonder what kinds of mental rigidities, which can be like a kind of shadow for Aquarians, just like, the tendency to over harmonize for Venus ruled sign, the tendency to be a little rigid mentally, even if you have good ideas, you could just be a little stuck in them when you're Saturn ruled air sign like Aquarius. So what kinds of mental boundaries are dissolving that are going to allow you to have stronger, more passionate, more immediate, more embodied connections to the life that you're living and the people around you and in the environment that you live in. That's what comes to my mind with this one.
I love that, because I think about Neptune moving into Aries, particularly in the third house. There's a sense where Aquarians are wonderful at creating a reality around them that is information based. It's based on data bits, but it's very highly systematized and very idealized. This is the system and the way this information or these pieces should come together, and it's the way, this is the way. And oftentimes, like you said, Adam, it's a great idea. Neptune comes into the third house, and there's a sense where it's like almost like, I hate to, I know the Matrix is such a spiritual cliche, but it's a little bit like that scene where Keanu Reeves sticks his hand in the mirror and the mirror comes out with him, right? There's that sense. It's like there's something that you thought was, you had constructed in terms of a reality that maybe isn't as solid as it appeared to be. And Saturn can help with that, because that's your ascendant ruler coming into contact with Neptune, being like a little bit like the person who sort of like midwifes that relationship into a new reality that says like, yeah, here, I can bridge you from this very highly structured place that you've been in into something that's probably a little less structured, but no less valid, and also provides you with a lot of information. Like on the point you were saying, Adam, I say to my yoga students all the time, try to teach them what listening to your body means. Like, feel the sensory feedback from your body. Feel that innate sense of contraction or expansion. Is this right? Is this wrong? And that just provides you with this whole new level of what feels a little bit more like liquid reality, because it's not as cerebral, but it absolutely provides you with like the other half of your perceptual capabilities, which is really, really can be a great adventure to undertake.
Absolutely.
You guys crushed it. I'm thinking something similar. The phrase that came to mind for me was like bucking the system. But in this case, the system might be your own. Like you might, oh, I have limited myself in how I'm approaching things, from, as simple as like what you do when you wake up in the morning. You might realize like it actually doesn't feel good to immediately get on my phone. Like I maybe want to start my day a different way that feels more aligned to me and who I want to be and who I'm becoming. And I think there's like a great potential for an opening up of who you are that you then like embody through how you move about your day.
Yeah. I would also say one thing we didn't mention for Aquarians is the potential for the topic of siblings to be important anytime the third house is active like that. You could see some of those things happening in relationships with peers, and siblings are like sort of closely bound together in the third house. Finally, we have Pisces, and we bring this Aries energy into your second house.
Okay, Pisces peeps. Saturn's been in your first house for a little while. So this is a big shift. And you've really had to, I would imagine, come into your own. Like Saturn kind of said, all right, be who you want to be, like step up to the plate and be that person. So now you're at a moment where you're maybe using your newly found or newly rediscovered resources to do something with that intel. And so it's exciting. I think it's very exciting, but it is potentially overwhelming. Of course, we could talk about actual money here too. We could talk about time. It's not just your talents, but there's a new way in which you're realizing like what's possible, what you can do, how you can repurpose and utilize these things that you have at your disposal. It might feel really tricky, and there might be a lot of stops and starts, and it might feel like you don't, like I would push back on any feeling of like, I just don't have the time or I just don't have the energy. And maybe some days you don't, maybe you have to take it slowly, but don't let that be a reason to give up. Stay the course. And like we were saying a couple of signs ago, like 1% every day, and see how it feels. Because there is something that you're wanting to like construct here and to bring into reality that you can do. But if you try to do it all at once, you're going to want to give up.
Yeah, I like that.
Love that, Dana. And I'm also seeing this too, is like there's a a lot of more slow burn stuff I see here for Pisces too, because this is coming on the heels, like you said, Dana, Saturn and Neptune being in your first house. You're going to have eclipses in your first house in September. So you'll have the lunar eclipse in your first house. You have eclipses clock the first, seventh house axis. You're going to have Jupiter moving into Cancer. That all to me says, if I put that all together quickly, there's a sense of like, the shifts that have happened with Saturn and Neptune are sort of being buttoned up by these eclipses with stuff that might feel like it flows pretty quickly in the fall. There's something that changes pretty quickly in your identity in the fall, but there's a preparation point for that happening with Saturn and Neptune moving into the second house, where there's a sense of like getting a handle on anything that feels like it's like been overwhelming. In terms of, it could be financial, that's easy with the second house, anything in terms of resources, anything in terms of your sense of worth or value. Like there's like one little piece where it's like, I still feel like I don't quite know how to get my head around this worth value thing, or I don't know quite how to get the sense around this financial thing. And Saturn comes in and says, again, here's my bullet list. We're going to go through this and figure this out. Because there's still a little bit to be done about this assertion of your own self that's coming in the fall. And for some reason, I just intuitively, I feel like this is the beginning of a sort of shoring up process for those eclipses that are coming in September.
Thank you guys. Yeah, I'm looking at this from the standpoint of what I think when I think of the second house, I think about what am I building? What am I developing? What am I cultivating? As in the ancient astrological tradition of India, the second house is connected to Arta, and that is a sort of philosophical domain of life that has to do with the means by which we achieve an end, where the end is usually material comfort, security, and pleasure. And it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You know, those things aren't taken care of. It's harder to focus on spiritual things. And so I just wonder for Pisceans, if there is not some connection between the spiritual, personal, psychological goals of your life and the means by which you're able to peacefully and securely pursue those goals, because something on the material level is in a better place. And so how right now, I wouldn't be surprised for Pisces if there's a conversation saying like, I have some spiritual goals, some personal goals, psychological goals. There's material circumstances that need to change so that those things can become more of a priority. And really looking at that, or feeling like that's a focus for the next season of life somehow. So I'll add that in.
Well, look at that. We made it around the wheel.
We did it.
We did it. Yeah, thank you everybody for listening. I want to tell you how you can get in touch with Alex and Dana. So if you are interested in booking a reading with Alex or seeing any of his good work, you can check alexamorosi.com, and also a new Substack called The Subtle Universe. Come check Alex and his work out. Written work is absolutely fantastic. You were just saying how much you've been enjoying doing this, Alex.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. And I really love being able to share through long form writing. So yeah, I'm loving it.
alexamorosi.com and Substack, The Subtle Universe. I want to also tell you how you can get in touch with Dana, which is Dana is at selfhelpwitch.com. You can book a reading with her there and check out her good work. And then on Instagram, also Self Help Witch, where she has regular good content. For those of you who are wondering about Alex's Instagram, usually I promote it. He's taking a small like sabbatical from Instagram. It is usually Alex Amorosi Healing. And if and when he comes back to Instagram, I will promote that again. But I applaud you, man. It's good to take a break every now and then from different social medias and focus on other things, which is why people should be really stoked, because you'll do a lot of work on Substack while you're taking that break.
Exactly. Yeah, that's my goal.
Very cool. Well, thank you both for being here. Thank you everybody for listening. We're really glad that we could outline some of where things might be going with this Saturn-Neptune transit. After I sign off, there will be an informational video about the year 1 course that's coming up at the end of June. So stick around to hear more about that. And we will see you again tomorrow. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Hey everyone, thanks for sticking around. I'm excited to tell you about our upcoming program, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. It is our first year course in Hellenistic astrology that begins at the end of June. June 22nd is our starting date. I'm going to take you over to the course page to tell you more about the program and what you will learn while you are in it. So here we go over to the Nightlight Astrology website. You can find this at nightlightastrology.com. Click on the courses tab, go to the first year course. Now, this program is ideal for people who maybe have a little bit of background already in astrology. Maybe you've done some studying on your own independently, taken some courses or webinars and workshops, but you're looking to deepen your understanding of astrology. And maybe Hellenistic astrology in particular has been calling to you. I'll tell you more about what Hellenistic astrology is in a minute, but on the first year course page, you're going to find everything that the course includes. I want to make the structure of the course clear first, and then at the end, I'm going to tell you 5 reasons that I think anyone might have for studying astrology, and you can see if you check any of those boxes. First of all, there are 30 classes on the year. It's just a little under a year-long program with 30 webinars. Every webinar is 2 to 3 hours long, including a lively Q&A and conversational section after we finished our lesson for the day. Each of those lessons I lead personally through live webinars, so you can attend those live. If you want to follow along at your own pace in your own time on your own schedule, you can always look at the recordings and take those in. And I'm going to show you what the class page looks like so you can see how you can interact with the course as uniquely and creatively as you want to. But you can either attend the live webinars or listen to the recordings or audio or video. In between major units of study within those 30 classes, we have separate classes outside of the 30 classes that are essentially tutoring sessions led by our staff, our course directors. We have 3 of them for our first year program, 3 tutors that help me guide every single class you're in and lead study sessions, and are also staffing an interactive group forum discussion where you can ask questions, look at charts, practice what you're learning with all of your classmates and with tutors there to help you. They'll always answer questions within a business day. So it's a really well-staffed, well-structured program. In between those major units of study and the breakout sessions, we also have guest speakers that come in throughout the year that you get free access to. The recordings are archived for you in your class folders. So you're getting people within our curriculum. You're also getting to visit with some astrologers who are outside of the Nightlight School, but we really admire their work, and so we bring them in. You also have a ton of bonus material. With every lesson, we have recommended quizzes, study guides, optional reading. And that allows people who are really, really, intense, deep, like studious types to go as far as you want to with the material, while other people who are maybe, content to take things in at, just kind of taking in the classes, that's there for you too. So you can kind of go as deeply as you want to. The class, as the year goes on, goes through major units of study in ancient Hellenistic astrology. So if you're not familiar with ancient Hellenistic astrology, this is the earliest form of horoscopic astrology. This is where the astrology that you've probably learned today comes from originally. And that makes some of its features unique. Like, for example, ancient astrologers utilized whole sign houses. We study why they used whole sign houses, how they used them, and we study the why behind really everything: houses, signs, planets, aspects, dignities, essential and accidental dignities, delineation approaches. How do you read and predict within a natal chart? All of those theoretical areas of astrology, we not only learn how to do, but we learn the why behind it. And this is what I think people find most empowering about the course, is that ancient astrology really helps to give you the rationale for everything so that you have the insight available to go off script. What I mean by that is, like, let's say you're learning about a sign, Aries or Taurus or a Gemini, something like that. Ancient astrology won't just give you a list of the adjectives or keywords or descriptions of, say, a sign or a planet. It will give you an underlying philosophical explanation that then allows you to extrapolate from it the kinds of lists that you read in textbooks, which means you'll have an understanding of why everything on a list in a textbook is there in the first place. And you'll also have the insight and creativity available to add things to the list that are a part of your own unique intuition and contribution to astrology. And this is what ancient astrologers wanted students of astrology to learn, the why behind everything. So this is a class where even though you're seeing things like planet signs, houses, dignities, aspects, and you're like, oh, I've already learned about those things. Not if you haven't studied Hellenistic astrology. I don't mean to sound condescending, but like truly, most people's experience coming through this program is, wow, I had no idea all that I didn't know about the roots of everything that I've understood thus far about astrology. So it really is about digging into the philosophical core of why we do everything. And then you have greater intuitive and creative capacity as an astrological craftsman or craftswoman. So anyway, that's a brief explanation of why I think Hellenistic astrology is important. Not to mention that ancient astrology was really focused on our ability to accurately describe and predict things in the realm of karma, fate, and destiny, whereas modern astrology's hallmark and strength is psychological depth. And so when you put the two together in our program, which is why it's called Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, I think you have something really special. So on that note, you can see everything that we cover here. So there's a video with some of our alumni you can watch. Everything is there on the page. Now, there are 5 reasons that I want to touch on briefly before I tell you about your payment options and need-based tuition. These are 5 reasons to study astrology that if you mark any of these boxes, especially if you mark several of them, then I think it's a good indication that you might be ideal for this program, might be an ideal fit. So the first one is if you find that astrology has become a part of your daily, weekly, monthly, yearly spiritual practice, it is a part of how you lead an inner life, then there is nothing more empowering than deepening your connection to that language, because that puts you more in the driver's seat. It's always good to have astrologers that you rely on, teachers that you listen to, get a little objective perspective, especially when you're looking at your own chart through a reading. But there's really nothing more empowering than learning to speak the language at a deeper level for yourself. And if that calls to you, if you want to understand things and be able to speak more confidently and clearly about this sacred language that you love, and this is a great reason to take a structured program. Number 2 is that you feel called to read charts for people. And look, not everyone who takes our programs is on a professional track, but we have 4 years worth of professional training programs at Nightlight that will prepare you to read professionally for others if that's the path that you're on. Maybe you don't even know if you're on that path. That's fine too. Many people take our programs just for the sake of their own personal enrichment. And again, to be kind of more in the driver's seat with respect to your astrological journey. You have more of an understanding. You can be more confident in reading symbols and experiencing transits with your own understanding that you've cultivated. But sometimes people want to read for other people. This will definitely set you up to do that. We have a certification track where you can take exams at the end of every year. They're optional. You don't have to if you're not on that level of interest. Number 3, you have done a lot of self-study. You've heard things from here and there, but you're looking to bring it all together. It is overwhelming to study astrology on your own. So if you want organization, structure, and coherence, what you're getting in this program is going on 15 years of training astrologers, 15 years of developing curriculum that has in mind the overwhelm that many people experience. And this program is structured year 1, year 2, year 3, however far you want to go with our curriculum, to give you an organized, structured, coherent way of understanding the history and language of astrology from both ancient times to modern times in all of the vastness that the field includes. And also, as we go, we want to give you the confidence that you are a part now of an astrological lineage. Astrology has always been practitioner-based. Coming through Nightlight, you are going to have the opportunity to feel aligned with a lineage. If you like my work, if you feel aligned with the way I speak the language, then this might be a good reason to come study with us. Now, if you're seeking the why behind things, if you're like, yeah, that's interesting, I get it, I understand, but why? Why signs? What's the difference between a sign and a house? Why do they ever come up with a sign and a house? What's the distinction philosophically? Why does Mars represent this? Why does Mars in this sign represent that? If you are someone who feels empowered by understanding the why behind things, you are going to love this program, because that's how I am as a teacher. That's how I am as a person. And that's what this program is really all about. Number 5, you are looking for astrological community. Look, I think Nightlight is unique in terms of the kind of warmth, acceptance, safety, and inclusiveness that our community includes intellectually, spiritually. We are really pride ourselves on being a peaceful kind of family. I'm a Cancer, right? So it's kind of a family-oriented environment. So anyway, I will end it there. If you check any of those boxes, you may want to consider studying with us. Now, I'm going to take you over to two things. I want to show you the dashboard. So here is the Thinkific page. You're going to join this. And on your dashboard, you're going to find any courses that you've enrolled in at Nightlight. And there are many, so you may end up in being involved in multiple courses. And you'll find that they're all there on your dashboard. Click on one of them, and it will take you in. You're going to find that on the left-hand side, there's orientation instructions, course information, class links, and calendar, all the technical stuff you need to know when you join the course. And then you're going to find that there's, when you go through the lessons, that the lesson includes the video, the audio, the slides, the transcripts, the Q&A box text if you couldn't make it live and see what people were talking about, flashcards, homework, a bonus PDF with all sorts of additional recommended reading, bonus videos, additional video links for bonus material. So every single time that you want to visit something within the course, everything is nicely organized. So you can see here, I'm going to pause this before it starts going, but you can embed the video right there. It's embedded and you can watch it. And then if you wanted to, you could also, right here, you could also download the video and watch it on your own device. And that's same for the audio as well. And then as you go, you'll see all of the lessons are laid out. The study sessions are also recorded if you can't make those live. So everything is nicely arranged on the website for you. And that makes it a course that if you wanted to take 3 years to accomplish, you could take 3 years to accomplish. If you want to take it for the sake of getting certified, you have the full year plus an additional year to take the exam. So, 2 years total that we give people if you're on a professional track. But most people complete the program in a year. And a lot of people, over 50% of our students go on to our year 2 and then our year 3 and horary programs as well. Now, final thing I'm going to show you is right here. You're going to find here is the enrollment options at the bottom of the first year course page. Again, this is at nightlightastrology.com, and you're going to click on the first year course, go to the bottom. The early bird payment saves you several $100s off the cost of the course. That's available till May 15th. Early bird installment plan saves you on the installment plan, regular cost of the course. That's also only available until May 15th. And then need-based tuition. All of our programs include a need-based option where we give you a sliding scale and we say, you pick your monthly tuition number within this sliding scale, which is greatly reduced off the normal tuition price. That is for people who are on a fixed or limited income, receiving disabilities, single mom, whatever the case might be. We want to make sure that nobody's priced out of studying astrology. So you don't have to feel any shame. If that is you, if you need help, if you want to take this, but you need to make it work within a tight budget, we get it. Times are tough right now. We don't think people should be priced out of studying a sacred subject like astrology. So we've been offering need-based pricing for 15 years. Nightlight is a donation-based school. It started that way. We have a sliding scale, so it's kind of like donation. You get to choose your rate anyhow. So if that's something that will help you, please use it. Thank you for listening to this. I hope it gave you a really deep and comprehensive introduction to what the course is all about and why you might find it exciting to come study with us starting at the end of June. So any questions you have about the program as you're visiting the course, email us, info@nightlightastrology.com. We'll be glad to talk about anything that you have questions about. We are here and we have a wonderful staff of people at Nightlight who will be a part of your learning experience and are all glad to help you. All right, that's it. We'll see you again later. Bye.